IKIM FM, inspirasi utama anda.
IKIM FM, inspirasi utama anda. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon to all dear listeners of IKIM FM. Welcome to a brand new episode of Shaping Tomorrow. I'm your host, Patricia Afrina. Alhamdulillah. Thank you very much for listening to us from wherever you are. Either you are listening to this to radio or even through our social media pages, Facebook and YouTube. So in this episode of Shaping Tomorrow, we are going to continue in answering and also in having the conversations that talks about what kind of frameworks or things that we can do to improve of our civilization and also future vision for a better Malaysia, inshallah. So to talk about it, I've here in the joining me online actually is Dr. Syafiq Borhanuddin, who is the fellow from IKIM. Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
How are you, Doctor?
Alhamdulillah, I'm good, Patricia.
Alhamdulillah, it is such a pleasure to have you with us for today's conversation. So to introduce the topic for today, I think this is a very interesting topic, which is engaging with secularized future visions. And I believe that when we talk about the future vision, just talk about it really relate to the modernization. So as we look as in, I would say the today's context where we have the technology, we have the data, and also the global system that increasingly shape how we imagine our tomorrow, our future. And all these things has become, I would say, a highly contested space. Many of the dominant narratives guiding the involve our national policy. It can also involve our education, everyday life emerge, and specifically if we talk about it specifically from these secular frameworks, the visions that emphasize the usually we talk about the rationality, progress, and also human autonomy. So I believe we have a lot to share with our audience for today's conversation. So Doctor, what do you want to share with our audience on today's conversation, engaging with secularized future visions?
Thank you very much, Patricia, and thank you for that excellent preamble introduction. Really sets the stage of what I want to talk
Mashallah.
without rehearsing, actually. And indeed, what I would like to share is how a proposed way of engaging with all these grand secular visions or grand visions for the future, grand visions for the future, as well as we can also call it a grand narrative for the future, because that is what we are being presented today by many parties. And these parties can come from leading thinkers from the West or can come from organizations like the World Economic Forum. And sometimes it seems like we don't have anything much to say from the Muslim or from the perspective of Islam. So what I want to present is actually a teaser in preparation for a conference in Istanbul next month, inshallah, which I have been selected to present among other presenters in a conference in Bogazici University. So in a way, it's a work in progress, and hopefully later on, I look to publish it as a proper academic paper.
Sure.
Now, the context that I would like to set is a verse from the Quran. Because why, if Muslims were to ask, why must we bother with this future vision? I mean, they are just trying to propose, right? It doesn't mean we will follow that proposal. But that's important actually, because for centuries, Muslims have always been careful in terms of ideas and visions not coming from their own lands and not coming from their own tradition, because in the Quran Allah mentioned that we shouldn't mix truth with falsehood. The verse in the Quran uses the term wala talbisul haqq bil batil. So haqq referring to truth, batil falsehood, and the terms that we also use in Malay language. And interestingly, the word talbis that is used in this verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 42, ayat 42, talbis is from the root word labasa, meaning to wear. In Arabic, we say, labasa referring to the clothes you want to wear.
Okay.
So it's like you're covering up truth with falsehood, because this one originally,
Ah,
the verse is directed to Bani Israel. Allah's sort of communication through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not to cover the truth of Islam with the whatever falsehood that is what in your mind in your minds. But this is also relevant that we shouldn't relevant to also relevant to Muslims. We shouldn't be like the Bani Israel, where we confuse or mix truth with falsehood. Now,
yes.
what kind of falsehood or potential falsehood are we dealing with? We're talking about big influential visions coming from thinkers who are globally influential, and these are some examples. The ones on, and they are all, I believe, they are, of course, like two of them here that I'm displaying the on the video on the slide. Two of them have Jewish roots, but I do not think they identify themselves with their religion, Judaism, anymore.
Oh, I
So in a way,
see.
they are all atheists, secularists,
Mm,
trying to propose a vision of the future for humanity. The one that I'm referring to, number one, with the book title Homo Deus, Yuval Noah Harari. He's actually Israeli intellectual, and he's been given so much platform, and I believe even our educated corporate and perhaps policymakers know about him in Malaysia, right? And
okay.
everywhere in the Muslim world.
So he's
And then
known for that.
he's known about talking about history of tomorrow. He's giving a the title of the book is History of Tomorrow. So in other words, he's trying to give a grand narrative from telling us what is our history of humanity, and therefore what kind of future we should pursue. The details of that I will give some information after this.
All
And
right.
then in the middle we have someone like Steven Pinker, who publishes the book Enlightenment Now, meaning uh, to, although enlightenment can refer to a historical period in the West before
Yes.
modernity, but now he's Professor Steven Pinker, a top professor from Harvard University. He's making the case now we should have the whole world should be joining this agenda for reason, science, humanism, and progress, right?
Mm,
And then we have Francis Fukuyama, very famous. He's although the name is of sounds like Japanese, but he's all and out American. He grew up in America, and also he studied at Harvard University under the famous Samuel Huntington, who wrote about the Clash of Civilization. And this Francis Fukuyama, this book of his, really went uh, global in terms of the discussion,
all right.
because and in this book, I think he published at the age of 36. 36. And the title is The End of History and the Last of Man. Very bold kind of title. Talking about how basically, of course, he's not talking about the end of the world, but actually he's referring to making reference to a term that is being used by earlier Western philosophers like Hegel and Nietzsche about what will be in this modern age, what kind of system that will be most dominant.
I see.
And so he's talking about liberal democracy and modernization. Everyone have to follow that direction now. Okay.
So, Doctor, they omit the religion part into this, and of course, since you mentioned that they are atheists, there will be no mention about the hereafter, sort of like that.
That is one thing, but what's more, I think, more concerning is stuff like this. I'll give you more example. How what they say about Islam should be called into question, and therefore why we should give a counter proposal, counter narrative from our own viewpoint. Francis Fukuyama, because his book on the end of history was published much like in the 90s, I think. And then when September 11 happened in 2001, he published an article, right, titled "Islam's Clash with Modernization." So he didn't say the radical Islam or extremist Muslims. He said Islam's clash with modernization. So he's saying something about Islam. Although I think over the years he's more careful in terms of saying like saying explicitly Islam is the problem. No, I think over the years what he actually means is radical Islam. But in this article it's published, he's not careful, so that's dangerous kind of argument to make. You see, Islam's
Okay.
clash with modernization. That's number one. And then another one is Professor Steven Pinker. He was interviewed by the Israel Times because he's a Jew, as I told you.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, this Israel Times happily highlight the views of Professor Steven Pinker about Islam and Muslim countries. And this is from that book, Enlightenment Now. So Professor Pinker is saying the Muslim countries appear to be sitting out of the progress enjoyed by the rest of the world. Muslim majority countries score poorly on measures of health, education, freedom, happiness, and democracy too. Islam
Mm.
itself, Professor Pinker says, predicts an extra dose of patriarchal and other illiberal values across countries and individuals. And then another thing he said, much of this resistance in the Islamic world to progress can be attributed solely to religious belief. So Pinker is even more bold. He's saying Islam, Muslims are not progressing, and because
Uh-huh.
they're not progressing because of their belief, because of Islam.
What? Okay. And
Okay.
then does it also include with any evidence to support this, doctor?
Yes, I think the book that he wrote about this is very thorough. It's like 500 or 600 pages, and IKIM has a copy. So
Mm.
inshallah, that's why I intend to write an academic article of this to
It
carefully
seems
and
like
properly refute. Yeah.
it is as if that Islam is, I would say, a disease for the modernization. Is it that is how for me from preserving Islam, like that is how he tried to imply it into his audience.
Yes, he's saying Islam is the problem in the world
Okay,
today.
very straightforward
In
into
other words.
that. Okay.
Okay, but I have a proposal how we should counter this kind of thinking and argument, right?
Mm-hmm.
And also, I want to highlight this because I'm the World Economic Forum, a very powerful organization in the world, influencing policymakers. I think like 4 years ago, they had this event, and they also have a publication called The Great Narrative, right? So they invited, I think, many thinkers, scientists to put together their ideas and publish as a book what should be the great narrative for the future of humanity.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember there being a Muslim or a top Muslim thinker there, but just to show you what's going on right now in the world when we talk about visions of the future. Bill Gates, of course, and Bill Gates regarded Steven Pinker. He loves Steven Pinker, for example. So all the billionaires in the world in the West, like the Silicon Valley billionaires, tech billionaires, they
Mm.
refer to people like Yuval Harari and Steven Pinker that I just shared, and they follow that line of argument. So imagine
Mm.
that all these richest people on earth and supporting that kind of narrative. So I'm sure Muslims will be asking themselves, why are we not following this vision, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are many more examples, but yeah, to summarize very briefly, like what basically their central thesis or central argument, like Fukuyama, of course, talking about the end of history. What there's a modernization phase, like
Mm.
from primitive, and then now we're moving towards end of history in the sense that all nations should be following the liberal democracy and like a free market economy, capitalist economic model, right? So
I
Steven Pinker
see.
talks about every nation should be progressing in the sense of in the Enlightenment criteria. Yuval Harari talk about the primacy of data. We need to consider post-humanism and whatnot, right? Okay,
Okay.
where
Uh,
do we stand? Where do we stand?
mm.
That's why I think our senior thinker, Royal Professor Syed Muhammad Naquib al-Attas, is very important in this conversation, actually, global debate. If no one is coming into that debate, then we should be benefiting from the wisdom and insights of Professor al-Attas because he actually is ahead of his time and he already saw this kind of uh,
Thinking.
thinking
Mm.
emerging and influencing the Muslim world, right?
Yes.
So when we talk about Professor Atas, he's not talking about Islam as a Sharia, as a law, as a legal system only, because these people like Steven Pinker, Harari, they tend to view Islam as a very rigid kind of legal system that we follow, right? But al-Attas understands Islam more than that. It's a civilization. It has a worldview. It has a vision of reality. How it looks at reality is different, and it has a
Yes.
vision of the future as well. So, and in his books, he tries to show that, right? So his scholarship, like his complete entire body of works that he has published throughout his career, actually shows that we have a lot to say to that kind of debate and direction of humanity, right? Because we have in his books, Professor al-Attas talks about the Muslims having a coherent worldview, a coherent perspective. Like most thinkers, whether it be Harari, Steven Pinker, they have a different worldview. They don't see they don't refer to religions anymore or revealed sources, the earlier prophets, right? They don't refer even to their early philosophers, only except some they feel fit into their modern criteria, right? So the lens is very limited.
Okay. So,
Uh,
doctor, they are actually against the concept of the religion itself, or only the religion of Islam?
I think all religions, if you really scrutinize their writing, if you really look, in fact, Yuval Harari goes to the extent suggesting that all religions is in a way a myth,
It's
a
just an
fake,
idea.
a
Okay.
myth made up, concocted by the minds of people to so that they can come together and work together, collaborate in a peaceful way.
I
But that is
see.
a secularized idea of religion because you're saying secularization is a tool, just a tool, in an alat, in Malay language, you say just a tool for to control people. But it's from the Islamic point of view, religion is tells us the truth, not a tool.
Yes.
A tool is the very, even I think earlier thinkers like Marxist talks about religion being an opium for the masses kind of thing. That's a very Western secular way of looking
It
at
is.
what is religion, right? Yeah. So Islam, for us, religion, ad-din, gives us the meaning of how to look at truth and reality as a whole. So it's not a tool. It
Yes.
helps individuals to know what the truth is. It
The
helps
guidance.
societies to build their life, their civilization based on that truth, not based on uh, uh, what do you call this, doubt
Myth.
or myth or speculation, but based on very clear grounds, so that you can do good,
Yes.
not just on guesswork or just speculation or just based on your reason without having a clear big picture.
Yes, doctor.
So this is what I'm trying to say in this slide. Basically, Islam, unlike the Western worldview, is always evolving. But the worldview of Islam does not need to evolve like in the West. That's why the West, if you look at this diagram, I think it may help people to understand. The above diagram is I call the linear progress. This is a very Western secularized way of looking at progress. So from the Western point of view, for people like Yuval Harari, people like Steven Pinker, people like Francis Fukuyama, we start from a primitive, infantile, medieval period, right? This is the earlier, like maybe 1,000 years ago.
Yes.
Then we have moved to the Renaissance, where we became a much more prosperous and beautiful, have a beautiful architecture and art. And then we moved to scientific revolution, where religion plays a lesser role, but science plays the bigger role. And then we moved to enlightenment, where religion completely have no role, but human reason and human autonomy, like you said, is the main criteria of progress. And then we have industrial revolution. Now we have modernity. Now we are more mature as a humanity, as in terms of our thinking, our consciousness. We shouldn't go back. But
So
when they
instead
say,
of
yeah, when they say we, it's actually the West, not the rest of the world, not China, not India, not Africa.
I
It's
see.
just Europe.
Okay. So the western side of the
Yeah,
world. I
yeah.
see. So it is as if like the human nowadays they are much more, I would say, advanced if they were to compare to the human previously in the primitive or the medieval era.
We can say now we are more advanced in terms of the quantity side of things, but not in terms of the quality, right?
Mm,
In terms of the
yes.
quality of life, in terms of the quality of people's character, quality of people's thinking. In the past, without the tech, but yet look at all the brilliant philosophers, thinkers, scientists, artists,
Yes.
the kind
Mm-hmm.
of beauty they produce, the kind of architecture. Until now, we cannot. Our replication is so poor
Yeah.
of the past artistic or architecture works, for example.
Mm.
And they can produce voluminous books without electricity, without printing machine. But look at the voluminous and the wisdom that is contained in those books.
Mm.
See, so I humbly suggest, and like Professor Attas have mentioned this in his book. From the late 70s, actually, he mentioned this, but he didn't do a
Subhanallah.
diagram. But I am constructing a diagram so that perhaps it'll be easier to see what Professor Attas is saying. And also in his later books, Professor Atas, like in his On Justice, Nature of Man, published in 2015, and the most recent book, Islam, The Covenants Fulfilled, published in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. Professor Atas, interestingly, gave us a grand history about how we should look the prophets from God's creation, earlier prophets, to now. And he used terms to make sure we understand
Mm.
world history of humanity in a correct perspective, right? Like for
Mm.
example, he talked about there being a God's plan because before Bani Adam, the descendants of the Prophet Adam, us,
Yes.
they could have been creatures like humanity, like human beings, right? But they are
Mm.
not
Yes.
Bani Adam.
Yeah.
Because Bani Adam cannot be a caveman.
Mm. As
So
what they are currently proposing from the
yes,
Western
yes.
perspective.
So we're not denying, Muslims are not denying, and Islam do not deny the presence of dinosaurs and
Yes.
cavemen. But
Mm.
these are only like the God is part of God's plan to prepare Earth in so that it's habitable for Bani Adam. Hence,
Ah.
dinosaurs and cavemen were destroyed. Bani
Mm.
Adam was raised, and then from there, from Nabi Noah onwards, there's rudimentary religion because for all these earlier prophets, they were sent for particular groups of people, not a universal religion yet.
All right.
Only Islam is a final, truly revealed religion. If you
Yes.
really do careful research and look into it from in the Quran as well. So
Mm.
in a way, you can say there's some rudimentary, like in terms of religious phases, right?
Mm.
But it's not the same as how the West looks at the medieval period, classical period. It's primitive. Now only we're most advanced because that perspective, in a way, if we follow that perspective, then we're saying the prophets are all primitive. They are not. They have nothing to offer us. These are all
Yeah.
historical relic
A-
and
and that's how they say that the Quran is just a
yeah,
story from the Prophet
yeah.
Muhammad.
And now they're saying religions are all myth. They're
Allah.
insinuating that, right? Insinuate,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So therefore, when I think a closer way of looking at human history from the Muslim point of view, as well as Eastern point of view, is like in a way like a cyclical, like circular, like this. Like I'm drawing that diagram, and you can
Mm.
also use a tree analogy because Professor Atas used a tree analogy before. Basically, it's talking about the way we show history is like of course that God is forever involved in
Yes.
every moment,
Mm.
but also God introduced the Anbiya, great people in history, to
Mm.
intervene to play out certain significant role in building civilizations. Without the prophets, there would be no civilization. The
Okay.
prophets are the one who, if you think about it, the ones who bring order, bring some kind of stability, teach people. ethics, so that they don't kill each other all the time, right?
Yes.
And don't go on living in a very hedonistic way, maximizing pleasure, minimizing pain.
Mm.
Right? That's a hedon. The prophets make sure people can live properly, actually. So
Like giving
without
the
the prophet,
guidance.
yeah. So in other words, without prophets, there's no civilization, because civilization is not just building. Civilization
Mm.
is the right uh, uh, internal building of the people, internal architecture of the people, right?
Yes.
And then another way to look about history is that in the Quran it talks about there's a certain pattern, like it's called sunnatullah. It's sometimes certain empires rise, certain empires fall, certain civilization rise, certain civilization fall. In
Mm.
history, in the Quran, there are many stories of people of the past, like Ad and Thamud. They were great people, a great civilization, but because of they disobeyed Allah and whatnot, they fell.
Yes.
So there's always that way, sort of phases in history, rise and fall, rise and fall. So maybe a closer way of looking of human history is not the linear. Linear ni macam straight from
Mm.
one to another
So
to
cannot
other.
go back.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
return.
exactly. As if the past has no relevance for you, right? You
Yeah.
don't. So even these things actually have can cause big problems if Muslims are not careful in terms of how you look, in terms of history and human progress, because the West, this is their basis of defining what progress is.
Mm.
Fukuyama, Steven Pinker, what do you call it, Yuval Harari, because they all follow this evolutionist modernization theory. This is called a modernization theory, the one above, with the arrow,
The
from
linear.
linear, very linear, just straightforward like that.
Yes.
But I
Alright.
think for Islam and for the great Eastern Asian religions and civilizations, they have a different way of looking at advancement. That's why until today, even big nations are not comfortable in terms of the West imposing their perspective on them, like China, Russia, right? And now
Mm.
Russia now saying, no, we're not the West. They are distancing themselves from the West.
It's
So that,
separate.
yeah.
So doctor, this I would say this circle is actually applicable from no matter what time, so it is relatable now. It also be relatable for the future and also from what happened in the past. Is that correct, doctor?
Yes, and this should be the basis in terms of how Muslim and or Islamic nations and countries and civilization base
Should
their
look at.
thinking in terms of w- the future, because they cannot have a kind of arrogant attitude in terms of the past, or in terms of the
Mm.
prophets and the lessons they have imparted, the wisdom from the past, right? So
Mm.
an interesting analogy is like this, like tree, but in a four season land, four season country. So like a Muslim country or Muslim civilization goes through four seasons, like the tree.
Yes.
So during its great period, when it controlled world trade, it brought about a great deal of justice, like the Turkish Ottoman Empire at one point. That can be considered the summertime. But for the last 200 years, maybe we're in the winter, where there's no
Mm.
fruits,
Mm.
and everything. The leaves are falling down, but it's not impossible. And in fact, it's part of God's customary way of acting, sunnatullah, that one day, inshallah, the Muslims, provided they remain firm, steadfast, they will return to the summertime. But when? Wallahu a'lam. It's not for us
Yes.
to say. But that is the pattern that we always see. That's why many people feel like the West now is declining in terms of their political strength, in their economy, and their
Mm.
values, their culture is like going down. Everyone is saying that today. The
Yeah.
commentators, the social scientists, the political scientists are saying that. So that's why now there's a talk about that the West shouldn't monopolize world order. You need to have a multipolar
Mm.
world order, right? So that means the West, the hegemony of the West, the control of the West is now going down. So it's like a pattern like that, going in circle, or like the tree. Maybe
Yes.
now the West will go through a winter phase slowly,
Mm-hmm.
but the other civilization will begin to rise. You know,
Mm.
it's summer for them.
They
If
relates to the conversation of last seasons on the multipolar world.
exactly,
I
yeah.
see. That's very interesting.
Okay, this is the reference that I spoke about when uh, seeing history or human progress as God's plan, and we shouldn't use an evolutionary perspective to look into these things, right? So Professor Attas used very beautiful expressions in his book on justice and the nature of man. I just want to read this passage because it's, I think, very important, because there are many things that he said in this book, but this, I think, in this passage also, in this context, is very relevant to global debates about vision of the future. He said everything that has come to pass in succession on a principle of order in God's renewal of creation. There is a basis of this in the Quran, by the way. This principle of order in God's renewal of creation, khalqun jadid, has been predetermined by God from eternity. The unfolding of events in the spiritual world that is carried over into the physical world is the working of God's plan enacted in existential sequence in spiritual and physical space and time. Okay, so something for us to ponder upon in terms of how we look. So if we go back to all this, these are just representative figures who basically influencing our visions of the future in the world today, right? But there are more. But I felt that these three figures is deserving for us to try to challenge and give an alternative, because they say something about Islam. That's the thing, and religion. So I felt that we need to say something back. So
Yes.
Francis Fukuyama, I think if you draw upon Professor Attas's scholarship about worldview of Islam and history, you can see basically this is a false premise about what or what to be progressive is. I use the term cosmos. Cosmos
Cosmos.
means cosmos means justice or order, because they think liberal democracy will bring the best kind of order. But this is I mean, even with liberal democracy, we are still seeing Gaza happening right in front of our eyes, right?
Yeah.
With all
It's
the
not the
superpowers
best
having
framework, obviously.
yeah, with
Uh-huh.
all the superpowers, so-called superpowers in the world having liberal democracy, but we are still seeing great injustice like Gaza
Yes.
and many other places. So actually, this is a false notion of what order and justice is. We should because it's built on secular premises. That's the thing.
Yes.
And then Steven Pinker, when you talk about the Western Enlightenment with science and reason, data, they may give you more material comfort and whatnot, but that is not the same as moral progress, as we said, spiritual progress, intellectual progress, even, right? Because intellectual progress is not the same as merely, it's not limited just to the advancement of scientific enterprise that we see today. There's more to that as well in terms of intellectual progress. And then Yuval Harari, his idea understanding of human beings is very limited. He does not like most Western scientists and thinkers. They don't believe in the soul anymore. There's no ruh. It's just a physical being with what do you call this? With
Yes.
neurons, and it's just a biological creature. That's why he has no problem proposing that we're more or less like computers. Basically, we're just mechanical machines, and therefore, why don't we think about being transhuman, like moving to a different kind of evolution, right?
I
So we can
see.
merge with machine in the future. That's the next stage of
The
evolution.
humanoid, the combination of
Yeah.
human, half body, as you can see, half body robot, half body human, some sort of like that.
Yes. So they are seriously thinking about that, and I think the big tech players in Silicon Valley in the US, they are exploring that already. You see, but I
Oh,
think for Muslim scientists and technologies and Muslim world, we should prioritize. There are many more things that we have to develop in terms
yes.
of the human intelligence. Even that we have not properly unleash human intelligence today, right? In terms of the education system and how you utilize that to create a proper a just economic system and governance system, and create a really fulfilling, happy, spiritually balanced life. All these things are
Yes.
still not resolved yet by the West. Yet they want to jump
We
into
have
that direction.
we have a lot of imbalance in this world.
Yeah.
Doctor, if you don't mind me asking, just briefly, not they're saying that Islam is a threat to demonization. I really would love to know about what is Islam perspective on demonization itself. Does it actually is it the goal that we really want to go to, or this term modernization is actually just a, I would say, a term created by them to, I would say, as you show about this linear progress, it's just a, I would say, I don't know whether it's called propaganda or it's just the way how the ultimate goal that we have to go to. Because now, I mean, listening to this, I'm not sure whether going to the modernity is really what we want to achieve here.
That's an excellent question that we should be asking after listening to this, Patricia. You're so advanced. So well
Oh,
done. So yes, that's basically, once you have listened to this if supposing our listeners have listened to this for the first time, that's exactly what we should be questioning. So in other words, we shouldn't simply uncarefully say, "Oh, everyone needs modernization." Or all the Muslim countries simply need to follow modernization, because that's what Mustafa Kemal Ataturk the founding father of Turkey, did. And what he did when he wanted to modernize Turkey was to get rid of all what he considered to be traditional religious institutions, including the madrasa, including the all the sheikhs. No more place for them. And so even the the great books that were published before that, before modern Turkey was dismissed. You
eliminated,
change the
yes.
script of the language from there was an Ottoman language which was in Arabic script. They
Mm.
Romanized it, changed it. So
Oh,
automatically, many modern Turks don't even know what their forefathers wrote in terms
they
of
wipe out the
knowledge.
identity also,
Yeah,
identity
you
and
change the
history.
identity, right? So this is a question that I think is still not resolved, because Muslims have not really thought about this in a very deep way, right? Of course, there are scholars who saw this problem. People like Professor al-Attas, and in Turkey also there was an alim, a scholar by the name of Syed Nursi, who lived in early 20th century, who was also very worried about the direction of Muslims, right? So there are scholars who are very deeply rooted in knowledge, who saw the problems if we follow this kind of direction as a society, as a civilization, as a ummah. So alternatively, I mean, there are many ways to think about it. And the alternative ways to think about, okay, then what is the direction we should aspire? Why not we pursue or aspire what our forefathers have always pursued? But of course, we can make it more relevant or contextualize it in today's context, which is to build a civilization, peradaban, tamaddun. Why is
Tamad.
these terms no longer relevant today? At least IKIM, as a tagline, we say understanding Islam, building civilization, because IKIM is very aware about the agenda of building civilization is a permanent one since the beginning of the time of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam.
Sallallahu alaihi
That's
wasallam.
why when the Prophet migrated from Mecca, Hijrah, to Yathrib, he changed the name of Yathrib eventually to Medina, with the root word
Subhanallah.
deen, so that when you build a city, the religion is at the heart of it. But not simply, but not in the sense that, oh, you have to start punishing people. Everyone have to uh, outwardly comply with the Sharia. No, that's not what we mean by civilization. I think if you look at many Muslim lands in history in terms of how they built civilization, it was a beautiful civilization, and they don't force people to comply with Islam because it's in the
It
Quran, and
is.
we all knew that. There's no compulsion in religion, but they won people's hearts. They demonstrate justice, more justice than other people and nations, right? That's how people many people decided, including in our part of the world now, there's 200 Muslims because there was a civilization, right, which the
Yes.
colonizers destroyed for 300, 400 years. They disrupted that process of building a
Yes.
civilization in this part of the world. So
Allah
we need to
Akbar.
continue that project that was already that was already in place, right? But I'm not
Mm.
saying we have to totally get rid of everything modern and everything, but we have to rethink in terms of what is our vision for the future, what is our basic like fundamental roots, like the tree, like what is our roots, what's our basis for our progress. So that's why,
Mm.
like China, they are very careful about this. Therefore, they are doing a whole nation agenda. Everyone must know the Confucianist philosophy, because Confucius is one of their greatest icons in terms of wisdom on
Yes.
ethics. Although he lived 2,000 years ago, Confucius
Mm.
lived in China 2,000 years ago, longer than Aristotle, I think, and Plato. but
Oh,
they are,
much further before
but
that.
the president of China and the leadership of China recognize the
Mm.
wisdom of Confucius is still relevant today, because these are their roots in terms of in terms of having a good family, having a good living, a balanced lifestyle, right?
Mm.
So there's already a nation that is thinking along our lines. Actually, of course, it's not perfect. China is
Mm.
not perfect. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I think there are more intelligent people from other faiths. They realize, hold on, we shouldn't be following this blindly, right?
Ah.
Right?
Mm.
So we should be having our own roots and try to advance based on our own system, based on our own model. So
Yes.
this is the implication actually.
And I think this is a wake up call for us from the Muslim countries to take this, I would say, inspiration from. If you look at, as you mentioned, Doctor, just now, that even people from other countries, people from other religion also begin to understand more about this in context of the civilization itself and opposing the Western framework on what should be the better future. So in here, again, do we want to really achieve modernization, and how do we actually, I think one thing that is important here in how we measure the advancement of our civilizations. As you mentioned, yeah, we are modern, advanced. Perhaps you can say that we are much more advanced in terms of technology, but if you look at in terms of our education, perhaps in terms of our nations build, our people itself, does it really matter, or does it really as in power of the technology, the advancement of technology that we have now? And
Yeah.
hopefully that by listening to your sharing, Dr. Inshallah, our listeners out there perhaps can be inspired to understand more about this thing and how they can contribute to the society and becoming a better ummah, inshallah. So Doctor, as we are reaching the end of this conversation, do you have any final say to close this conversation, Doctor?
Yes, I would like to end by stating perhaps the way forward that we were already reflecting about just now. Basically, the now that, if supposing we can appreciate the fact that we have a different way of looking at progress, different vision of the future as a result. Now already, I think there's already a global trend which we talked about before on this Shaping Tomorrow, that there is a global trend talking about we need a multipolar world order. It doesn't just mean there are many superpowers now can play a bigger role, but it should mean a multi-civilizational world where the West, the Chinese, the Russians, all they recognize. Look, even Muslims have something to say in terms of how we should progress, or don't impose or don't insist that we progress like you. I think China and Russia can accept that, but now it's time for the West to accept this as well. Their intelligentsia, their leaders, they should embrace this. It doesn't mean they cannot enjoy the West cannot enjoy their lifestyle. They can carry on,
Mm-hmm.
but we have our own vision and our own direction that we should be pursuing. And of course, more importantly, it's the Muslim nations that should have clarity about this first, and then also, of course, it doesn't mean the Muslim want to control the world as well. If we have our own vision for the future, right? We're not the extremist like want a caliphate or want to control the world, or want to insist the whole world
Y-
follow the Sharia. No, that's not
yes.
the way. The way. In fact,
Mm.
I think the Muslims will be open for multi-faith partnerships, and then this
Hmm.
multi-faith partnerships is about moving to a more balanced, or I use the term human flourishing, because many philosophers, thinkers can love this term, meaning human being, instead of focusing on having the most wealth and having what do you call this, success in a limited sense. We
Mm.
should have aim for human flourishing in our societies, but within
Mashallah.
planetary boundaries. This one also the experts are talking about, is planetary boundaries. There are people like Kate Raworth from, I think, Oxford University, talking about this, and
Mm.
many thinkers in the West. They're talking about the need to have an economic model, but within the planetary boundaries. Although they're talking about this from the secular point of view, but because they're very conscious about the problems or the destructions of our actions towards the environment, we can agree with this, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean we have our own perspective and wisdom to refer to on this. So we have that. So I think with that, I think that's all I can share for now. Patricia, thank you so much.
Mashallah. Thank you very much, Doctor, for your sharing on to this conversation. And I would say that this is a very an eye-opening, not just for me, but I believe also the same for our listeners out there on how should we look upon our future. And concluding from your sharing here that from the first point that we will love to live in a say multi-civilizational or the multipolar world, or the where civilization for multiple civilization can work on together,
Yeah,
living in this world. And also departure, I think this is the most interesting part, the departure from the capitalist corporate competition, and also the movement towards multi-faith partnership for human flourishing within the planetary boundaries. MashaAllah. And to our listeners, if you have any questions, or perhaps you would like to share your thoughts on today's conversation, you can leave it on the comment section of this posting on Facebook and YouTube. Or you can simply contact us through our WhatsApp contact 011 29004004. And again, Doctor, thank you very much for your sharing on today's episode. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullah.
And to our listeners, thank you again for listening to us today. Don't forget to tune in to us next for more conversation. All this only on IKIM FM, Inspirasi Utama Anda.